The Experiences of Loveday Brooke, Lady Detective, by C.L.Pirkis, author of Lady Lovelace, etc., etc. Drawn Daggers. I admit that the dagger business is something of a puzzle to me, but as for the lost necklace, well, I could have understood that. A child would have terribly understood that, said Mr. Dyer irritably. When a young lady loses a valuable article of jewelry and wishes to hush the matter up, the explanation is obvious. Sometimes, answered Miss Brooke calmly, the explanation is as obvious as the one to be rejected, not accepted. The two of these had been, so to speak, jangling a good deal that night. Yeah. Perhaps the fact was in part to be attributed to the biting east wind which had Loveday's eyes watering with the gritty dust, and she had made her way to Lynch Court, and which was, at the present moment, sending the smoke in aggravating dusts down the chimney into Mr. Dyer's face. Thus it was, however, on the various topics that had chanced to come up for discussion that morning between Mr. Dyer and his colleague, they had each taken up, as if by design, diametrically opposite points of view. His temper altogether gave way now. If, he said, bringing his hand down with emphasis on his writing table, you lay it down as a principle that the obvious is to be rejected in favor of the abstruse, you'll find yourself launched into a predicament of having to prove that two apples added to two other apples do not make four. But there, if you don't choose to see things from my point of view, that is no reason why you should lose your temper. Mr. Hawk wishes to see you, sir, said a clerk at the moment entering the room. It was a fortunate diversion. Whatever might be the differences of opinion in two of these which might indulge in private, they were careful never to parade those differences before their clients. Mr. Dyer's irritability vanished in a moment. Show the gentleman in, he said to the clerk. Then he turned to Loveday. This is Reverend Anthony Hawk, the gentleman at whose house I told you that Miss Monroe is staying temporarily. He is a clergyman of the Church of England, but gave up his living some 20 years ago when he married a wealthy lady. Miss Monroe has been sent over to his guardianship from Pekin by her father, Sir George Monroe, in order to get her out of the way of a troublesome and undesirable suitor. The last sentence was added in a low and hurried tone, for Mr. Hawk was at that moment entering the room. He was a man close upon 60 years of age, white-haired, clean-shaven, with a full, round face to which a small nose imparted a somewhat infantine expression. His manner of greeting was urbane, but slightly flurried and nervous. He gave Loveday the impression of being an easy-going, happy-tempered man who, for the moment, was unusually disturbed and perplexed. He glanced uneasily at Loveday. Mr. Dyer hastened to explain that this was a lady by whose aid he hoped to get to the bottom of the matter now under consideration. It is, if there's no case of objection in my showing you this, said Mr. Hawk. It came by post this morning. You see, my enemy still pursues me. As he spoke, he took from his pocket a big square envelope, from which he drew a large-sized sheet of paper. On this sheet of paper were roughly drawn, in ink, 2 daggers about 6 inches in length, with remarkably pointed blades. Mr. Dyer looked at the sketch with interest. We will compare the drawing and its envelope with those you previously received, he said, opening a drawer of his writing table, and taking thence a precisely similar envelope. On the sheet of paper, however, in this envelope enclosed, there were drawn one dagger only. He placed both envelopes in their enclosures side by side, and in silence compared them. Then, without a word, he handed them to Miss Brooke, who, taking a glass from her pocket, subjected them to a similar careful and minute scrutiny. Both envelopes were of precisely the same make. Each were addressed to Mr. Hawk's London address in a round, schoolboyish copybook sort of hand. The hand so easy to write and so difficult to bring home to any writer on account of its want of individuality. Each envelope likewise bore a Cork and London postmark. The sheet of paper, however, that the first envelope enclosed bore the sketch of a one dagger only. Loveday laid down her glass. "The envelopes," she said, "have undoubtedly been addressed by the same person, but these last two daggers have not been drawn by the hand that drew the first. The dagger number 1 is evidently drawn by a timid, uncertain, and inartistic hand. See how the lines wave and how they have been patched here and there. The person who drew the other daggers, I should say, could do better work. The outline, though rugged, is bold and free. I should like to take these sketches home with me and compare them again at my leisure." "I felt that I'd be sure your opinion would be," said Mr. Dyer complacently. Mr. Hogg seemed much disturbed. "Good gracious!" he ejaculated. "You don't mean to say that I have two enemies pursuing me in this fashion? What does it mean? How can it be? Is it possible? Do you think that these things have been sent to me by the members of some secret society in Ireland, under error, of course, mistaking me for someone else? They can't be meant for me. I have never, in my whole life, been mixed up with any political agitation of any sort." Mr. Dyer shook his head. "Members of secret societies generally make pretty sure of their ground before they send out missives of this kind," he said. "I have never heard of such an error being made. I think, too, we mustn't build any theories on the Irish postmark. The letters may have been posted in Cork for the sole purpose of drawing off the attention to some other quarter." "Will you tell me a little about your loss of the necklace?" here said the lady, bringing the conversation suddenly round from the daggers to the diamonds. "I think," interposed Mr. Dyer, turning towards her, "that the episode of the drawn daggers, drawn in a double sense, should be treated entirely on its own merit, considered as a thing apart from the loss of the necklace. But I am inclined to believe that when we have gone a little further into the matter, we shall find that each circumstance belongs to a different group of facts. After all, it is possible that these daggers may have been sent by way of a joke, a rather foolish one, I admit, by some harum-scarum fellow bent on causing a sensation." Mr. Hawk's face brightened. "Ah, now do you think so? Really think so?" he ejaculated. "It would lift such a load from my mind if you could bring home the thing in this way to some practical joker. There are a lot of such fellows knocking about in the world. Why, now I come to think of it, my nephew Jack, who is a good deal with us just now, and is quite so steady a fellow as I should like him to be, must be a good many such scamps among his acquaintances." "A good many such scamps among his acquaintances," echoed Loveday. "That certainly gives plausibility to Mr. Dyer's supposition. At the same time, I think we are bound to look at the other side of the case, and admit that possibly these daggers being sent in a right down sober earnest by persons concerned in the robbery, with the intention of intimidating you and preventing full investigation of the matter. If this be so, it will not signify that thread we take up and follow. If we find the sender of the daggers, we are safe to continue upon the thief. If we follow up and find the thief, the sender of the daggers will not be far off." Mr. Hawk's face fell once more. "It's an uncomfortable position to be in," he said slowly. "Suppose, whoever they are, they will do the regulation thing, and next time we'll send an installment of 3 daggers, in which case I may consider myself a doomed man. It did not occur to me before, but I remember now that I did not receive the first dagger until after I had spoken very strongly to Mrs. Hawk before the servants about my wish to set the police to work. I told her I felt bound to honor Sir George, to do so as the necklace had been lost under my roof. Did Mrs. Hawk object to your calling to the aid of the police? Asked Loveday. Yes, most strongly. She entirely supported Miss Monroe in her wish to take no steps in the matter. Indeed, I should not have come round as I did last night to Mr. Dyer if my wife had not been suddenly summoned from home by a serious illness of her sister, at least. He corrected himself with a little attempt at self-assertion. My coming to him might have been a little delayed. I hope you understand, Mr. Dyer. I do not mean to imply that I am not master in my own house. Oh, quite sure, responded Mr. Dyer. If Mrs. Hawk and Miss Monroe give you any reasons for not wishing you to involve in the matter, all told, I should think they have given 100 reasons. I can't remember them all. For one thing, Miss Monroe said it might necessitate her appearing to the police courts, a thing she would not consent to, and she certainly did not consider the necklace worth the fuss I was making over it. And that necklace, sir, has been valued at over £900, and has come down to the young lady from her mother. And Mrs. Hawk. Mrs. Hawk supported Miss Monroe in her views on the presents, but privately to me afterwards she gave other reasons for not wishing the police called in. Girls, she said, are always careless with her jewelry. She might have lost the necklace in Pekin, and never brought it to England at all. Quite so, said Mr. Dyer. I think I understand you to say no one had seen the necklace since Miss Monroe's arrival in England. Also, I believe it was she who first discovered it to be missing. Yes, Sir George, when he wrote apprising me of his daughter's visit, added a postscript to the letter saying that his daughter was bringing her necklace with her and he would feel greatly obliged if I would have it deposited in little delay as possible at my banker's, where it could be easily got at if required. I spoke to Miss Monroe about doing this 2 or 3 times, but she did not seem at all interested to comply with her father's wishes. Then my wife took the matter in hand. Mrs. Hawk, I must tell you, has a very firm, resolute manner. She told Miss Monroe plainly that she would not have the responsibility of those diamonds in the house, and insisted that there and then they should be sent off to the bankers. Upon this, Miss Monroe went up to her room and presently returned, saying that her necklace had disappeared. She herself, she said, had placed the necklace in the jewel case, and the jewel case in her wardrobe, when her boxes were unpacked. The jewel case was in the wardrobe right enough, and no other article of jewelry appeared to have been disturbed. But the little padded niche in which the necklace had been disposed was empty. My wife and her maid went upstairs immediately and searched every corner of the room, but I'm sorry to say, without any result. Miss Monroe, I suppose, has her own maid? No, she is not. A maid, an elderly native woman who left Pekin with her, suffered so terribly from seasickness that when she reached Malta, Miss Monroe allowed her to land and remain there in charge of an agent of P&O Company until an outward-bound packet could take her back to China. It seems the poor woman, though, thought she was going to die, and was in a terrible state of mind because she hadn't brought her coffin with her. I dare say you know the terror these Chinese have of being buried on foreign soil. After her departure, Miss Monroe engaged one of the steerage passengers to act as her maid for the remainder of the voyage. Did Miss Monroe make the long journey from Pekin accompanied only by this native woman? No, her friends escorted her to Hong Kong, by far the roughest part of the journey. From Hong Kong she came on the Colombo, accompanied only by her maid. I wrote and told her father I would meet her at the docks in London. The young lady, however, preferred landing in Plymouth, and telegraphed to me from there that she was coming by rail to Waterloo, where, if I liked, I might meet her. She seems to be a young lady of independent habits. Was she brought up and educated in China? Yes, by a succession of French and American governesses. After her mother's death when she was little more than a baby, Sir George could not make up his mind to part with her, as she was his only child. I suppose you and her Sir George Monroe are old friends. Yes, he and I are great chums before he went to China, about 20 years ago, and it was only natural when he wished to get his daughter out of the way of a young Denver's impertinent attentions that he should ask me to take charge of her till he could claim his retiring pension and set up his tent in England. Is that the chief objection to Miss Danvers' attentions? Well, he is only a boy of 21 and has no money in the bargain. He has been sent out to Pekin by his father to study the language, in order to qualify for a billet in the customs, and it may be a dozen years before he is in position to keep a wife. Now, Miss Monroe is an heiress, will come into her mother's large fortune when she is of age, and Sir George, naturally, would like her to make a good match. I suppose Miss Monroe came to England very reluctantly. I imagine so. No doubt it was a great wrench for her to leave her home and friends in that sudden fashion to come to us, who are, one and all, utter strangers to her. She is a very quiet, very shy and reserved. She goes nowhere and sees no one. When some old China friends of her father's called to see her the other day, she immediately found that she had a headache and went to bed. I think on the whole, she gets on better with my nephew than with anyone else. Will you kindly tell me how many persons your household consists of at the present moment? At the present moment, we are one more than usual, for my nephew Jack is home on his regiment from India and is staying with us. As a rule, my household consists of my wife, myself, a butler, cook, housemaid, and my wife's maid, who just now is doing double duty as Miss Monroe's maid also. Mr. Dyer looked at his watch. I have an important engagement in 10 minutes' time, he said. I must leave you and Miss Brooke to arrange details as how and when she will begin working inside your house. For, of course, in a case of this sort, we must, in first instance at any rate, concentrate attention within your four walls. The less delay the better, said Loveday. I should like to attack the mystery at once, this afternoon. Mr. Hawk thought for a moment. According to present arrangements, he said with a little hesitation, Mrs. Hawk will return next Friday. That's the day after tomorrow, so I can only ask you to remain in the house till the morning of that day. I'm sure you will understand there might be some little awkwardness and... Oh, quite so, interrupted Loveday. I don't see at the present that there will be any necessity for me to sleep in the house at all. How would it be for me to assume the part of a lady house decorator in the employment of the West End firm, and sent by them to survey your house and advise upon its redecoration? All I should have to do would be to walk about the rooms with my head on one side and a pencil and notepad in my hand. I should interfere with no one, your family life would go on as usual, and I could make work as short or as long as necessary might dictate. Mr. Hawk had no objections to offer this. He had, however, a request to make as he rose to depart, and he made it a little nervously. If, he said, by any chance there should be a telegram from Mrs. Hawk saying she will return by an earlier train, I hope that is, you will make some excuse and not get me into hot water, I mean. To this, Loveday answered a little evasive that she trusted no such telegram would be forthcoming, but that, in any case, he might rely upon her discretion. 4 o'clock was striking from a neighboring church clock as Loveday lifted the old-fashioned brass knocker of Mr. Hawk's house in Tavistock Square. The elderly butler admitted her in and showed her into the drawing-room on the first floor. A single glance round showed Loveday that if her role was to be real instead of assumed, she would have plenty of scope for her talents. Although the house was in all respects comfortably furnished, it bore unmistakably the impress of those early Victorian days when aesthetic surroundings were not deemed a necessity of existence. An impress which people past middle age and growing increasingly indifferent to the accessories of life are frequently careless to remove.
Young life here is evidently a consequence, not part of the home. A troop of daughters turned into this room would speedily go about a different condition of things, thought Loveday, taking stock of the faded white and gold wallpaper, the chairs covered with lilies and roses in cross-stitch, and the knickknacks from a past generation that were scattered about on tables and the mantelpiece. A yellow damask curtain, half festooned, divided the back drawing room, and the front of which she was seated. From the other side of this curtain there came to her sound of voices, those of a man and a girl. "Cut the cards again, please," said the man's voice. "Thank you. There you are again, the Queen of Hearts, surrounded with diamonds, and turning her back on a knave. Miss Monroe, you can't do better than that to make your fortune come true. Turn your back on the man who let you go without a word, and—" "Hush!" interrupted the girl with a little laugh. "I heard the next room door open. I'm sure someone came in."
The girl's laugh seemed to Loveday utterly destitute of that echo of heartache in that circumstances might have been expected. At this moment Mr. Hawkins entered the room, and almost simultaneously the two young people came from the other side of the yellow curtain and crossed towards the door. Loveday took a survey of them as they passed. The young man, evidently my nephew Jack, was a good-looking young fellow with dark eyes and hair. The girl was a small, slight, and fair. She was perceptibly less at home with Jack's uncle than she was with Jack, for her manner changed and grew formal and reserved as she came to face with him.
"We're going downstairs and having a game of billiards," said Jack, addressing Mr. Hawk, and throwing a look of curiosity at Loveday.
"Jack," said this old gentleman, "what would you do if I told you I was going to have the house redecorated from top to bottom, and that this lady had come to advise on the matter?" This was the nearest, and almost Inglesy, approach to the fabrication that Mr. Hawk would allow to pass his lips. "Well," answered Jack promptly, "I would say, not before it's time. That would cover a good deal." Then the two young people departed in company. Loveday went straight to her work.
"I'll begin by surveying at the top of the house, and at once, if you please," she said. "Will you kindly tell one of your maids to show me through the bedrooms? And if it is possible, let that maid be the one who waits on Miss Monroe and Mrs. Hawk."
The maid who responded to Mr. Hawk's summons was in perfect harmony in the general appearance of the house. In addition, however, to being elderly and faded, she was also remarkably sour-visaged, and carried herself as if she thought that Mr. Hawk had taken a great liberty in thus commanding her attendance. In dignified silence she showed Loveday over the topmost story, where the servants' bedrooms were situated, and with somewhat supercilious expression of countenance, watching her making various entries in her notebook. In dignified silence also she led the way down to the second floor, where were the principal bedrooms of the house. "This is Miss Monroe's room," she said as she threw back a door of one of these rooms, then shut her lips in a snap again, as if they were never going to open again. The room that Loveday entered was, like the rest of the house, furnished in a style that prevailed in the early Victorian period. The bedstead was elaborately curtained with pink lined-up upholstery. The toilet table was befrilled with muslin and tarlatan out of the lightness of the table. The one point, however, that chiefly attracted Loveday's attention was the extreme neatness that prevailed throughout the apartment. A neatness, however, that was carried out with so strict an eye to comfort and convenience that it seemed to proclaim the hand of a first-class maid. Everything in the room was, so to speak, squared off to the quarter of an inch, and yet everything that a lady could require was dressing lay ready at hand. The dressing-gown laying on the back of a chair had a footstool and slippers behind. A chair stood in front of the toilet table, and on the small Japanese table to the right of the chair were placed hairpin box, comb, brush, and a hand mirror.
This room will want money spent upon it,
Said Loveday, letting her eyes roam critically in all directions.
nothing but Moorish woodwork and take off the squareness of these corners. But what a maid Miss Monroe must have! I've never before saw a room so orderly and at the same time so comfortable.
This was so direct an appeal to conversation that the sour-visaged maid felt compelled to open her lips. "I wait on Miss Monroe for the present," she said sharply. "But, to speak the truth, she scarcely requires a maid. I've never before in my life had dealings with such a young lady."
She does so much for herself, you mean? Declines much assistance?
"She's like no one else I've ever had to do." This was said even more sharpish than before. "She not only won't be helped in dressing, but she arranges her room every day before leaving it, even the placing of the chair in front of the looking-glass."
And to open the lid of the hairpin box so that she may have the pins ready for her hand,
added Miss Loveday, for a moment, bending over the Japanese table with its toilet accessories. Another 5 minutes were all that Loveday accorded for her inspection of the room. Then, a little to the surprise of the dignified maid, she announced her intention of completing her survey of the bedrooms of some other time, and dismissed her to the drawing-room door, to tell Mr. Hawk that she wished to see him before leaving. Mr. Hawk, looking much disturbed with a telegram in his hand, quickly made his appearance. "From my wife. She says she'll be back tonight. She'll be at Waterloo in about half an hour from now," he said, holding up a brown envelope. "Now, Miss Brooke, what are you to do? I told you how much Mrs. Hawk objected to an investigation of this matter, and she's very firm when she once says a thing, and—
set your mind at rest," interrupted Loveday. "I have done all I wish to do within your walls, and the remainder of my investigation can be carried out just as well at Lynch Court as or in your private rooms."
"Done all you wish to?" echoed Mr. Hawk in amazement. "Why, you've not been an hour in the house, and do you mean to tell me you found out anything about the necklace or the daggers?"
"Don't ask me questions just yet. I want you to answer one or two instead. Now, can you tell me anything about the letters Miss Monroe may have written or received since she has been in your house?"
"Well, yes, certainly. Sir George wrote to me about correspondence, and begged me to keep a sharp eye on it, as to nip in the bud any attempts to communicate with Danvers. So far, however, she does not appear to have made any such attempt. She is frankness itself in her correspondence. Every letter that has come addressed to her she has shown either to me or to my wife, and they have one and all been letters from old friends of her father's wishing to make her acquaintance now that she is in England. With regard to letter writing, I am sorry to say she has a marked and most peculiar objection to it. Every one of the letters she has received, my wife tells me, remain unanswered still. She has never once been seen since she came to the house with a pen in her hand. And if she wrote on the sly, I don't know how she would get those letters posted. She never goes outside the door by herself, and she would have no opportunity of giving them to any of the servants to post except Mrs. Hawk's maid, and she is beyond suspicion in the matter. She has been well cautioned, and, in addition, is not the sort of person who would assist a young lady in carrying on some clandestine correspondence."
"I should imagine not. I suppose Miss Monroe has been present at the breakfast table each time that you have received your daggers through the post. You told me, I think, that they had come by first post this morning."
"Yes, Miss Monroe is very punctual at meals, and has been present every time. Naturally, when I received such unpleasant missives, I made some sort of exclamation, and then handed the thing to the table for inspection. Miss Monroe was very much concerned to know who my secret enemy could be."
"No doubt. Now, Mr. Hawk, I have been a very special request to make for you. I will hope you will do and be the most exact in carrying it out."
"You may rely on my doing so to the very letter."
"Thank you. If, then, you should receive by post tomorrow morning one of those big envelopes you already know the look of, you will find that it contains a sketch of 3, not 2, drawn daggers.
Good gracious, what makes you think of such a thing as likely? Exclaimed Mr. Hawk, greatly disturbed. Why am I to be persecuted in this way? Am I to take it for granted that I'm a doomed man? He began to pace the room in a state of great excitement.
I don't think I would if I were you,
answered Loveday calmly.
Pray let me finish. I want you to open the big envelope, and may come to you by post tomorrow morning, just as you have opened the others, in full view of the family at the breakfast table, and hand it around the sketch that it may contain for inspection to your wife, your nephew, and to Miss Monroe. Now, will you promise me to do this?
Oh, certainly. I should be most likely to have done so without any promising. But I'm sure you'll understand that I feel myself to be in a particularly uncomfortable position, and I shall feel so much obliged if you will tell me, that is, if you'll enter a little more fully into an explanation.
Loveday looked at her watch. I should think Mrs. Hawk would be just at this moment arriving at Waterloo. I'm sure you'll be glad to see the last of me. Please come to me at my rooms at Gower Street tomorrow at 12. Here's my card. I shall then be able to enter into fuller explanations, I hope. Goodbye.
The old man showed her politely downstairs, and as he shook hands with her at the front door, asked again in a most emphatic manner if she did not consider him to be placed in a peculiarly unpleasant position. Those last words at parting were to be on the first with which he greeted her on the following morning when he presented himself at her rooms at Gower Street. They were, however, repeated in a considerably more agitated manner. Was there ever a man in so miserable a position? He exclaimed as he took a chair that Loveday indicated. I not only received the 3 daggers for which you prepared me, but I got an additional order for which I was totally unprepared. This morning, immediately after breakfast, Miss Monroe walked out of the house all by herself, and no one knows where she has gone. The girl has never been outside the door alone. It seems the servant saw her go out, but did not think it necessary to tell either me or Mrs. Hawk, feeling sure we must have been aware of the fact.
So Miss Hawk has returned, said Loveday. Well, I suppose you will be greatly surprised if I inform you that the young lady, who has so unceremoniously left her house, is at the present moment to be found at Charing Cross Hotel, where she has engaged a private room with the real name of Miss Mary O'Grady.
What? Private room? Real name O'Grady? I'm all bewildered.
It is a little bewildering, let me explain. The young lady whom you received into your house as the daughter of your old friend was in reality a person engaged by Miss Monroe to fulfill her duties of her maid on board ship, after her native attendant had been landed at Malta. Her real name, as I have told you, is Mary O'Grady, and she has proved herself a valuable coadjutor of Miss Monroe in assisting to carry out a program which she must have arranged with her lovers, Mr. Denver, before she left Peking.
What? Ejaculated Mr. Hawk. How do you know this? Tell me the whole story.
I will tell you the whole story first, and then explain to you how I came to know it. From what has followed, it seems to me that Miss Monroe must have been arranged with Mr. Danvers that she was to leave Peking within 10 days of her so-called doing, travel by route by which he came, and land in Plymouth, where he was to receive a note from her, apprising him of her whereabouts. So as soon as she was on board ship, Miss Monroe appears to have set her wits to work with a great energy. Every obstacle to the carrying out of her program appears to have met and conquered. Step number 1 was to get rid of her native maid, who, perhaps, might have been faithful to her master's interests and provided troublesome. I have no doubt that the poor woman suffering terribly from sickness, as it was her first voyage, and I have equally no doubt that Miss Monroe worked on her fears and persuaded her to land at Malta and to return to China by the next racket. Step number 2 was to find a suitable person who, for consideration, would be willing to play the part of a Pekin heiress among heiress friends in England, while the young lady herself arranged her private affairs to her own liking. That person was quickly found among the steerage passengers of the Colombo, and Miss Mary O'Grady, who had come on board with her mother at Salem, and who, from the glimpse I had of her, must, I should conjecture, have been absent many years from the land of her birth. You now know how cleverly this young lady has played her part in your house, how without attracting attention in the matter she has shunned the society of her father's old Chinese friends, who might be likely to involve her in embarrassing conversations, where she has avoided the use of pen and ink lest—
Yes, yes, interrupted Mr. Hawk. But my dear Miss Brooke, wouldn't it be as well for you and me to go to the Charing Cross Hotel and get all the information we can from inspecting Miss Monroe and her movements? She might be bolting, you know.
I do not think she will. She's waiting there patiently for an answer to a telegram she dispatched more than 2 hours ago to her mother, Mrs. O'Grady, at 14 Woburn Place, Cork.
Dear me, how is it impossible for you to know all this?
Oh, that last little fact is simply a matter of astuteness on the part of a man whom I deputized to watch the young lady's movements today. Other details, I assure you, in this somewhat intricate case have been indefinitely more difficult to get at. I think I have to thank those drawn daggers that caused so much consternation for having, in the first instance, put me on the right track.
Ah, said Mr. Hawk, drawing a breath. Now we come to the daggers. I feel you're going to set my mind at rest on that for once.
I hope so. It surprised you very much to be told that it was I who sent you those 3 daggers this morning.
You? Is it possible?
Yes, they were sent by me, and for the reason that I will presently explain to you. But let me begin at the beginning. Those roughly drawn sketches that you suggested terrifying ideas of bloodshedding and violence, to my mind, were open a more peaceful and commonplace explanation. They appeared to me to be suggested to the Herald's office rather than the armory. Cross-fitchees of the Knight Shield rather than the Poinard, and the members of secret societies are supposed to render their resentment brethren familiar. Now, if you will take a look at these sketches again, you will see what I mean.
There Loveday produced from her writing table the missives which had been greatly disturbed Mr. Hawk's peace of mind.
To begin with, the blade of the dagger as a common knife is, as a rule, at least 2/3 of the weapon's length. In this sketch, what you would call the blade does not exceed the hilt of the length. Secondly, please note the absence of a guard for the hand. Thirdly, let me draw your attention to the squareness of that which you consider to be the hilt of the weapon, and what's, to my mind, suggested the upper portion of a Crusader's cross. No hand grip could have such a hilt as one outlined here. After your departure yesterday, I drove to the British Museum and consulted a certain valuable work of heraldry, which has more than once done me a good service. There I found my surprise sustained in a surprising manner. Among the illustrations of the various crosses borne on armorial shields, I found one that had been taken from Henry Danvers from his own armorial bearings for his crest when he joined the Crusaders under Edward I, and which has since been handed down as a crest from the Danvers family. This was an important item of information to me. Here was someone in Cork sending to your house on 2 different occasions the crest of the Danvers family. Without objecting it would be difficult to say, unless it were some sort of communication to someone in your house. With my mind full of this idea, I left the museum and drove next to the office of P&O Company, and requested to have given me a list of passengers who arrived at the Colombo. I found the list to be a remarkably small one. I suppose people, if possible, avoid crossing the Bay of Biscay during the equinoxes. The only passengers who landed in Plymouth besides Miss Monroe I found were certain Mrs. and Miss O'Grady, steerage passengers who had gone on board of Salem on their way home from Australia. Their name, together with the landing at Plymouth, suggested the possibility that Cork might be their destination. After this I asked to see the list of passengers who arrived in the packet following Colombo. told the clerk who attended on me that I was on the lookout for the arrival of a friend. In that second list of arrivals, I found my friend, William Wentworth Danvers, by name.
No, the effrontery! How dared he? In his own name, too!
Well, you see, a plausible pretext for leaving Pekin could easily have been invented. The death of a relative, an illness of a father and mother, and Sir George thought he might dislike the idea of a young man going to England so soon after his daughter's departure, and may, perhaps, to you by the next mail for matter, was utterly powerless to prevent his doing so. The young man, like Miss Monroe and the O'Grady's, also landed in Plymouth. I had only arrived so far in my investigation when I went to your house yesterday afternoon. By chance, as I waited for a few minutes in your drawing room, another important item of information was acquired. A fragment of conversation between your nephew and supposed Miss Monroe fell upon my ear, and one spoke of a young man convinced me of her nationality. That one word was the monosyllable hush.
No, you surprise me.
Have you never noted the difference between the hush of an Englishman and that of an Irishman? The former begins his hush with a distinct aspirate, the latter with a distinct W. The W is a mark of his nationality which he never loses. The unmitigated whilst may lapse into whoosh, and he is translated to another soil, and the wish may of course time pass to whoosh, to be distinctly aberrant of the English hush which never attains. Now Miss O'Grady's was pronounced as whoosh, as it was possible for the lips of a Hibernian to utter.
And from that you concluded that Miss O'Grady was playing the part of Miss Monroe?
Not immediately. My suspicions were excited, certainly. When I went up to her room, in company of Mrs. Hawke's maid, those suspicions were confirmed. The orderliness of that room was something remarkable. Now there is an orderliness of a lady in arrangement of a room, and the orderliness of a maid. The two things, believe me, are widely different. A lady who has no maid or who has the gift of orderliness will put things away when done with, and so leave her room a picture of neatness. I don't think, however, it would for a moment occur to her to put things so as to be conveniently ready for her to use the next time that she dresses in that room. This would be what a maid, accustomed to arrange a room for her mistress's use, would do automatically. Now, the neatness I found in the supposed Miss Monroe's room was the neatness of a maid, not of a lady. I was assured by Mrs. Hawke's maid that it was the neatness accomplished by her own hand. As I stood there looking at that room, the whole conspiracy, if I may call it so, little by little pieced itself together and became plain to me. Possibilities quickly grew into probabilities, and those probabilities, once admitted, brought their suppositions in their train. Now, supposing Miss Monroe and Mary O'Grady had agreed to exchange places, the Pekin heiress for the time being occupied Mary O'Grady's place in a humble home at court, and vice versa. What means of communicating with each other had they arranged? How was Mary O'Grady to know that she might lay aside her assumed role and go back to her mother's house? There was no denying the necessity of such communication. The difficulties in its way must have been equally obvious to the two girls, and I think we must admit that we must credit these young women with having hit upon a very clever way of meeting those difficulties. An anonymous and startling missive to you would be bound to be mentioned in the house, and in this way a code of signals might be sent up between the two of them and not direct suspicion. In this connection, the Daggers crest, which is possible that they mistook for a dagger, suggested itself immediately, for no doubt Miss Monroe had many impressions of it on her lover's letters. As I thought over these things, it occurred to me that the possibility of a dagger, or cross, Number 1 was sent to notify the safe arrival of Miss Monroe and Mrs. O'Grady O'Court. The two daggers or crosses you subsequently received on the day of Mr. Denver's arrival at Plymouth, and were, I should say, sketched by his hand. Now, it was not within the bounds and likelihood that Miss Monroe's marriage to this young man, and the consequent release of Mary O'Grady, might be modified to her by sending of 3 such crosses or daggers here. The idea no sooner occurred to me than I determined to act upon it and forestall the sending of the latest communication and watch the result. Accordingly, after I left your house yesterday, I had a sketch made of the 3 daggers or crosses exactly similar to those you had already received, and it posted to you so that you would get it by the first post. I told off one of your staff at Lynch Court to watch your house, and gave special directions to follow and report Miss O'Grady's movements throughout the day. The results I anticipated quickly came to pass. About 9:30 this morning, a man sent a telegram to me saying that he had followed Miss O'Grady from your house to the Charing Cross Hotel, and furthermore had ascertained that she had since dispatched a telegram, which, possibly by following the hotel servant who carried it to the telegraph office, he had observed addressed to Mrs. O'Grady at Woburn Place Court. Since I received this information altogether, remarkable cross-firing of the telegrams has been going backwards and forwards along wires to court.
A cross-firing of telegrams? I do not understand.
In this way, as soon as I knew Mrs. O'Grady's address, I telegraphed her in her daughter's name, desiring her address to reply to 115A Gower Street, not to Charing Cross Hotel. About 3/4 of an hour afterwards, I received the telegram and reply, which I am sure you will read with great interest.
Here, Loveday handed a telegram, one of several that lay on her writing desk, to Mr. Hawk. He opened it and read aloud as follows. Am puzzled. Why in such a hurry? Wedding took place this morning, so you will receive a signal as to arrive tomorrow. Better return to Tavistock Square for the night. The wedding took place this morning, repeated Mr. Hawk frantically. My poor friend, it will break his heart.
Now the thing is done past recall, we must hope and make the best of it, said Loveday. In reply to the telegram, she went on. I sent another asking of the movements of the bride and bridegroom, and got his reply.
Here she read aloud as follows.
They will be at Plymouth tomorrow night, at Charing Cross Hotel the next day, as agreed. So, Mr. Hawk, she added, if you wish to see your old friend's daughter and tell her what you think of her parts you played, all you have to do is be at the arrival for Plymouth trains. Miss O'Grady has called to see a lady and gentleman.
Miss O'Grady has called to see a lady and gentleman, said a maid at the moment entering. Miss O'Grady? Repeated Mr. Hawk in astonishment.
Ah, yes. I telegraphed to her, just before you came in, to come here and meet the lady and gentleman, and she, no doubt thinking that she would find the newly married pair, has, you see, lost no time in complying with my request. Show that ID in.
It's all so intricate, it's bewildering, said Mr. Hawk as he lay back in his chair. I can scarcely get it all into my head. His bewilderment, however, was nothing compared to that of Miss O'Grady when she entered the room and found herself face to face with her late guardian, instead of the radiant bride and bridegroom whom she had expected to meet. She stood still in the middle of the room, looking the picture of astonishment and distress. Mr. Hawk also seemed to be a little at a loss for words, so Loveday took the initiative.
Please sit down,
she said, placing a chair for the girl.
Mr. Hawk and I have sent for you in order to ask you a few questions. Before doing so, however, let me tell you that the whole of your conspiracy with Miss Monroe has been brought to light. The best thing you can do now, if you want to share with it in treated leniency, would be to answer our questions as fully and truthfully as possible.
The girl burst into tears.
It was all Miss Monroe's fault for begging land, she sobbed. Mother didn't want to get into it. I didn't want to, and I was going to a gentleman's house and pretend to be what I was not. But she didn't want her £100.
Your sobs checked her speech.
Oh,
said Loveday contemptuously.
So you're to have £100 for your share in this fraud, were you? We didn't want to take it, said the girl, between hysterical bursts of tears. But Miss Monroe said we didn't help her, someone else would, so I agreed to. I think, interrupted Loveday, that you can tell us very little that we do not already know about what you agreed to do. What we want to do is tell you what you've done with Miss Monroe's diamond necklace. Who has possession of it now?
The girl's sobs and tears redoubled.
I had nothing to do with the necklace. It was never even in my possession, she sobbed. Miss Monroe gave it to Mr. Daggers 2 or 3 months before she left back, and he sent it on to some of his people when you were in Hong Kong. Diamond merchants who lent him money on it. De Castro. Miss Monroe said the name of these people.
De Castro merchants, Hong Kong. I think that would be sufficient for dress, said Loveday, entering it into the ledger.
And I suppose Miss Danvers attained that part of the money to use for his own traveling expenses, and handed the remainder to Miss Monroe to enable her to bribe such creatures as you and your mother to practice a fraud that ought to have laid both of you in jail.
The girl drew deadly white.
Don't do that! Don't send us a present!
She implored, clasping her hands together.
We haven't touched a penny of Miss Monroe's money yet. We don't want to touch a penny. If you only let us off, oh, pray, pray, pray be merciful.
Loveday looked at Mr. Hawk. He rose from his chair. I think the best thing you can do, he said, will be to go back home to your mother in Cork as quickly as possible. Advise her never again to play such a risky game. Have you the money in your purse? No? Well, then, here's some for you. There's no time getting home. It will be best for Miss Monroe, Miss Danvers, I mean, to come to my house and claim her property there. At any rate, there it will remain until she does so. As the girl, with incoherent expressions of gratitude, left the room, he turned to Loveday. I should like to have consulted Miss Hawk before arranging matters in this way, he said a little hesitatingly. But still, I don't see that I could have done otherwise.
I feel sure Mrs. Hawk will approve what you have done when she hears all the circumstances of the case, said Loveday.
And, continued the old clergyman, when I write to Sir George, as of course I must immediately, I shall advise him to make the best of a bad bargain, now the thing is done. Past cure should be past care, eh, Miss Brooke? And think what a narrow escape my nephew Jack has had.